After performance like we just saw from the Indianapolis Colts, all that's left are questions, really, and that's exactly what we're going to focus on today on this episode of Locked On Colts as we answer all your guys' questions. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right. Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. To download their game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. Our listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise mode when using the promo code Locked On in the game store. That's Locked On in all caps. This is Jake Arthur back with you today. Happy to be with you guys. Good thing that game was a little earlier than normal. It was on Saturday. Hopefully you guys got to rebound from your weekend a little bit because rough start overall. I'm joined by the beautiful Zach Hicks and the two of us from horseshoehuddle.com, of course. Today we're opening the floor to you guys once again. We've asked for your questions on Twitter, and it's pretty evident that everyone's just pretty much over this football product this season. Everyone's kind of looking forward to the offseason, some excitement from that. Your questions were very reflective of that fact. We're going to focus on the three most popular topics that you guys asked us about. Far and away, it was the Colts drafting a quarterback in the first round. Also, Chris Ballard in the future of the Colts GM position. And then we're going to finish it off with some kind of either or stuff that you guys sent in as well. So, Zach, the first one regarding young quarterbacks, this one is kind of a young NFL existing quarterback versus draft stuff, basically. So, the Colts are already slated to pick very high right now, especially after that loss on Saturday. But if they miss out on the guy they want and aren't just going to force it, they don't come away with Young, Stroud, Levis, whoever, what would be your reaction if they instead traded for Packers backup quarterback Jordan Love?
Well, before we get into this, I know exactly who asked this because he's been asking this question quite a bit on Twitter to me and some other people. So shout out to, do you have his at there, or I can't?
I'd have to look it up. Yeah.
Okay. He knows who he is. If he's listening, he knows who he is. He's asked this a lot, and I'm glad that we're going to get to this. Number 2, Will Levis, Jake, because Wan'Dale Robinson got on me last year when I interviewed him. After the interview, he was like, yeah, you said Levis. He was like, it's Will Levis. Make sure Will will get on you for that. So if you ever want to talk to Will Levis, make sure you get the
all right.
The name
well,
right
we
there.
can. So he is the mayonnaise and the coffee guy. So that's my beef there. So let's potato on that one.
Right. Now, getting to this question, I kind of want to dish it back to Colts fans here. What would your guys' reaction be if the Colts do not end up with a rookie quarterback after this draft? Like if they are, like whoever it is, if it's not a rookie quarterback starting for the team next year, what's your guys' reaction? Because at this point, just throw anybody back there that's a rookie. I don't mind Jordan Love, but again, it just feels like that retread route. And not that Jordan Love's ever really had a shot in the NFL. And even when he's had some shots, he's looked fine. Former first-round pick. So, there is something to like there. But it feels a lot like the Carson Wentz trade, or it feels like all those other kind of retread options. And I just don't know if this fan base can even get somewhat excited about another retread. You could give me the best retread option available, and that might be Jordan Love. I don't know if this fan base is going to be excited for that whatsoever. I don't think this fan base would be receptive to that. I think it's going to have to be a rookie quarterback for everyone's sanity, for just the sake of the franchise moving forward. I think they need to go young at quarterback. It could be Bryce Young to put a little play on words there, but I do think they need to go young. I don't know if this fan base can get behind a retread or like an older quarterback, even though I think Jordan Love is one of the more interesting options that could be available this offseason.
Yeah, I would agree. We've both been basically banging the drum that they have to come out of this with a quarterback early. That doesn't necessarily mean that they can't do both. Jordan Love will probably command a third or fourth round pick if I had to guess. I think it totally depends if we see him anymore the rest of the season, driving up that trade stock, whatever. Hypothetically, let's say the Colts sent Green Bay like a third or like a fourth or something, and still were able to get someone in the first round. Um, we've talked about Stroud maybe isn't the best fit, or Anthony Richardson later in the first round or something. Someone who needs a little time to develop, and maybe they feel Love is a little more ready to play right now. Sure, but I don't like putting all the eggs in the Jordan Love basket seems very negligent to the position once again. So
Yeah.
I'm not for that. If that is their sole solution this offseason, got to get another quarterback.
Yeah.
Yeah, so moving on from that one, would the Texans bypass Bryce Young for CJ Stroud or Will Levis? And at first thought that seems crazy that they would do that, but in passing, I saw someone post something on Twitter this weekend that Texans GM Nick Caserio does seem to really be more in on the bigger, I guess more prototype quarterback. Maybe not in terms of just like pocket ability, but just literally frame. And Bryce Young's main issue is that he's a skinny, smaller guy. There's concerns there about him getting hurt. So would the Texans bypass Young for a bigger guy? And if so, how quick are you running to the podium for Young if you're the Colts?
I mean, I don't think Bryce Young by any means is like a safe prospect. I don't think any of these guys are the textbook definition of safe. I mean, Bryce Young, like you mentioned, he's probably going to come in this offseason at what, 5'10, 5'11, like a buck 80, maybe like 185. Like that is an outlier size quarterback. And then you got to also factor in, he had a down year this season. He has dealt with some injuries at times in his career, and he doesn't have the strongest arm. It's not like we're talking about a guy who has Kyler Murray's arm and athleticism. This is a decent athlete with an average to above average arm. So there are a lot of concerns with Bryce Young. That being said, if he were available when the Colts are picking at 6 or 7 and Anthony Richardson were gone, which you guys know Anthony Richardson is my guy, then I would probably consider Bryce Young at that point, probably more so than CJ Stroud or Will Levis. But yeah, I totally see a scenario where the Texans go with a Will Levis who is more prototype, more traitsy, more upside, or a CJ Stroud who is more pocket passer, maybe more pro ready, or even Anthony Richardson who has the highest potential in this entire class. I could totally see a scenario where they go with one of those other three guys, or maybe even bypass quarterback altogether. Who knows? It's the NFL draft, a guy who just had less than 10 career sacks in his entire college career just went first overall last year. Like things get crazy on draft day. So I could totally see the Texans going with any other quarterback or even maybe like a Will Anderson or Jalen Carter.
Next one, and this one needs some more context provided with it afterward. But basically, do you think Anthony Richardson would be Chris Ballard's guy? We know Justin Fields was his guy a couple years ago. So comparing the two, basically, Justin Fields as a passer, he had some pinpoint accuracy on a relatively consistent basis at Ohio State. Made some of those bonkers throws that we've seen him make with the Bears in the preseason, or just he's had several highlight throws at some point, throughout his career. Anthony Richardson is not quite where Fields is as a passer. Would you say the same?
Yeah, I mean, to a degree. I think, and I won't take too long on this because I know we got to move on to our next segment, but Justin Fields, I think, was just more developed as a passer. Maybe not in terms of like reading a defense, but just mechanically and just knowing where to hit, which routes to hit against certain coverages, just because he had a lot more experience. I mean, Anthony Richardson played, I think, in like 14 games in college. I think he started like 14. So it's kind of a tough comparison to make. I do think athletically speaking, they are kind of similar. Richardson, obviously a little bit bigger, bulkier, stronger as a runner, but yeah, I think comparative wise, upside wise, I think that is a decent comparison to make, but it is kind of hard to say what Chris Ballard's type of quarterback is. Cause yes, we have some of the reports that he was in on Justin Fields. But besides that, he's taken draft picks on Jacob Eason, Sam Ellinger, He was part of the Kansas City Chiefs when they took Pat Mahomes. I don't think that there's enough data to really say like, oh yes, he has a type at quarterback. We've seen a lot of different typings at different points in the draft. So it really could be any of these top 4 guys could be the Chris Ballard mold there at the top of the draft. But yeah, I'm not going to say he's going to be out on an Anthony Richardson type by any means whatsoever, but it's hard for me to say like, oh yeah, that's a type of guy he'd go for, because we just don't know what Chris Ballard's type is at quarterback right now.
That's exactly right, because again, he's never really been handed the keys to go ahead and get his guy necessarily. I mean, they've had their chances. They've had their chances. But the cupboard wasn't stocked with the resources he wanted to go do that. Plus, he may not even be around to make that pick regardless. But guys, before we move on, I'm actually really pumped about our new partner and sponsor of today's episode, and that's the mobile game Ultimate Football GM. If you've ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your football franchise, or you don't like the product that a certain monopolized NFL game provides, then you'll want to give Ultimate Football GM a shot. You can manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through the season, and lead your team to glory. You're responsible for hiring the right coaches and coordinators, trading players, making draft picks, and just really navigating your franchise through free agency and the draft and all the ups and downs that come with the season. All this in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want to. Guys, you as Colts fans, I think you guys are a terrific audience for this game personally. There's plenty that the Colts could have done differently over the last few years from the top, ownership, player management, all that stuff. It's really your chance to do things your way, right the wrongs of this franchise from the last few years, basically. Our listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo Locked On in all caps in the game store. That's Locked On in all caps. So make sure to check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today.
And today's episode is also brought to you guys by Turo. Turo is the world's largest car sharing marketplace. With Turo, you can book any car you want wherever you want it from a community of local hosts. Book a spacious SUV or minivan for a family road trip. Get a classic or luxury car for a special event, birthday, or holiday. Find affordable economy cars if you're on a budget and just need to get from A to B. Test drive that new electric vehicle you've had your eye on to see how it fits your everyday life. Many Turo hosts can deliver the car right to you. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms and conditions and exclusions apply. Forget boring rental cars and find your drive at Turo.com. All right, Jake, so we're going to jump into some Chris Ballard talk with this next set of questions. And you guys sent us so many questions about Chris Ballard. Is he going to be here? What quarterback would he like? Who are some replacement options? Would a head coach want to work with Chris Ballard? So, Jake, one of the questions we got a lot was, who are some guys that we could look to replace Chris Ballard with if he is not back with the Indianapolis Colts next year? I'm not too like in depth with this. I look at the head coaching searches and stuff, and I can, go into more details with that. But in terms of a GM to replace Chris Ballard, the only thing I got to say is I want to steal from the Eagles front office or the Ravens front office. I just want to take from those places. But you have another list of guys here. Who are some guys that kind of stuck out to you in your little bit of research?
Yeah, I was looking at some of the, the hot GM candidates and stuff, and there were guys from the Eagles on there as well. So, and the Ravens, I think, have one of the top guys. But just looking through the list, they actually have a couple in-house options, of course. Ed Dodds is a guy that interviews for jobs every year. He's real picky, like Chris Ballard was. He's not just going to go everywhere. He'll go to the right situation. Morocco Brown as well, their former director of college scouting. His new title escapes me, but I'm pretty sure he got promoted in the last offseason.
It was like vice president of something. I think it was vice president of something.
Yeah, he went up, but he's basically, for the last several years, been overseeing the Colts undrafted free agent classes. And they, of course, up until last year, had like the longest streak in the NFL of undrafted guys making the week 1 roster. So he's done an awesome job. But otherwise, Adrian Wilson from the Cardinals front office, he actually was the safety who played for the Cardinals for a long time. He's one of the hot young candidates. He'll get interviews this year. Mike Borgonzi from the Chiefs. He is the brother of was it Dave Borgonzi?
Dave Borgonzi, yep, the linebacker coach.
Was the linebackers coach, former linebackers coach from the Colts. And then this one's interesting, but given what the Colts have been doing recently, Louis Riddick from ESPN. That one is intriguing because that one wouldn't come out of nowhere like Jeff Saturday did with head coach, because Louis Riddick has been talked about quite a bit in the last couple of years. I think he's gotten an interview or two at least. But as we know with the Colts, that one's not going to be off the table. The Colts love ESPN analysts to come in and make decisions for them. So that I would think is a possibility.
Oh, yeah. They have a great history of grabbing guys from ESPN and it just turning into great things. Historic outcomes in football games happen when the Colts bring over, an ESPN guy to run things. So,
of course.
I'm a kind of out on the ESPN personalities, but Adrian Wilson, I think, is an interesting name. I think Adrian Wilson probably has a really good shot at being the next GM of the Cardinals with Steve Keim stepping away.
Steve Keim, that whole thing is looking not great. So I would imagine he's a logical choice to stay there in-house.
Yeah, and then my only thing with Borgonzi, Mike Borgonzi, I know he's got a lot of good pub and stuff like that, is would the Colts go back to the Chiefs well if they fire Chris Ballard? Because that's exactly where they took Chris Ballard from. Would they be like, oh no, we're making the same mistakes? But yeah, no, I like those options there. But again, I'm just looking at the Ravens front office and I'm looking at the Eagles front office, and I just want whoever they have because they have some magic in those front offices. But that's all I can really say right now about GM candidates. I'm not too informed about that, and I don't want to give you guys some wrong information, but that's where I'm looking. I'm narrowing my sights at those spots if, for whatever reason, Chris Ballard is fired after the season.
Yep, and if he's not fired, he's obviously on pretty thin ice. We were asked, head coaching candidates might be pretty picky when it comes to the Colts if Ballard is retained, simply because you're signing up for a potentially lame duck or a position with potentially a lame duck GM. So does that mean that really just mostly the head coaching candidates who are desperate for a job or don't think they'll get another opportunity next year, is that basically what we're looking at in that instance?
Yeah, I think you're looking at very young and hungry or old and desperate, I think, are your two options there. So I don't know. That's
always great.
Right. Like, I don't know if a Ben Johnson would come here because he's going to get a lot of offers, or Shane Steichen, if it weren't for everything going there in Philly. If we removed it from that, I don't think he would come here. Or Sean Payton, highly touted. The only one I could kind of see is Jim Harbaugh, but we've had so many different podcasts about Jim Harbaugh, so I'm not going to go into detail on that one. But I think some guys that you could probably look at if Chris Ballard stays is, again, a Leslie Frazier. Makes a lot of sense. An older guy who's kind of desperate to get back in the head coaching ring. A Steve Wilks can make a lot of sense. A guy with a history with Chris Ballard who's done some decent things down there in Carolina. Those are the names that I keep coming back to if Chris Ballard stays, because they're kind of safe options, which Chris Ballard loves safe. He loves the very safe options. And they're kind of just that get back to that gritty football that he's kind of wanted when he has built this team. So yeah, if Chris Ballard's a GM after the year, I don't want to call him a lame duck GM because who knows with Jim Irsay, but I think Leslie Frazier or Steve Wilks make a lot of sense for who he could target as a head coach for the Colts.
Yeah, and there's a couple more loaded subtopics off this Chris Ballard thing, but one real quick. If he's retained, is there any hope of getting this thing turned back in the right direction? Like looking at Howie Roseman with the Eagles is a good example. The Eagles totally imploded and came right back. They got good again all of a sudden. So do the Colts have it in them if Ballard is retained to revive themselves, basically?
I think Chris Ballard would have to do something that he has not shown the ability to do in his tenure with the Colts, and that is change his philosophies. I think there's a lot of good things about him as a GM. Great talent evaluator, great draft mind, and he does get a lot of things right. But where he has fallen short continually is his lack of aggression at going at quarterback and just kind of taking the safe options or taking the options that he can pin on Frank Reich. The options that don't fall on him. Those are the ones that he's gone with at quarterback time and time again. And if you don't risk it, you're not going to get any payoff here in the NFL. And we've seen that throughout his tenure. So he's got to be more aggressive at quarterback, and he's got to eventually just use free agency in some way, in some form. Again, I know it's hard with Indianapolis, small market. Jim Irsay is not going to help you give out record-breaking deals in free agency, but Chris Ballard has this tendency to overly rely on young players and unproven players and rookie players, and just kind of throwing the onus at his coaching staff to make these things work instead of bringing in proven backups. We've seen it with pass rusher last season, with safety last season, obviously with offensive line this season. Those things just cannot fly in the NFL, and he's got to eventually adjust if he's going to stay the GM the GM of the Colts. And we're going on to 6 years of him being the GM is what it's going to be. 6 years, 2 years with Jacoby Brissett, 1 year with Andrew Luck, and then you got the Phillip Rivers, Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan. He needs to drastically change his approach to being GM, and then I think he can find some success. But right now, everything he's done so far has led to a 3-11-1 team, or whatever the heck the record is right now. A really bad football team is what this has led to. And they definitely need to change going forward. So I'm not here to say Chris Ballard is a bad GM or he can't find some success in it, but he's got to change, man. And I don't know if he can. I don't know if he can.
Yeah, that is questionable. And I feel the same about the Ballard situation that I did with Frank. Like, it's not a celebration for either of these guys. I mean, when anyone loses their job, it's not a celebration. But you shouldn't rejoice over that, because there's something to both of these guys where it could work if, like, they both have it in them for this to be really good. Like, for instance, I think if this roster, how it's been, over the last few years, if you give them a really good quarterback, I think this roster goes places. It's just not built totally correct to not have that guy in place. But like you said, you have to swing for the fences and get your quarterback. Like,
right.
You have to go out on a ledge and show more confidence and not just play it safe.
Right.
Free agency as well. So those are the two biggest areas I think that would have to be improved. I think it could still work, but he has to be willing to adapt, of course.
Right.
Same thing. I mean, with Reich, that's probably a bigger topic, bigger subject for something later. We could discuss that another time on another head coaching episode.
Right. Coming up, guys, we're going to talk about some either ors that you guys sent us. But first, this episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks. With Prize Picks, it's daily fantasy sports made even easier. Just pick 2 to 5 players. If they score more or less than their stat projection, then you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch. This includes NFL, NBA, Euro basketball, cricket, whatever you want. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. Withdrawals are also safe and fast. And Prize Picks is currently operational in over 30 states and in Canada. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for instant deposit match up to $100. All right, I ended that last ad there on like $1. So we're going to carry that energy here into the last segment.
It's emphatic.
Jake, I know, emphatic. I'm excited about Prize Picks. But guys, we're going to do some either ors here. Jake has the either ors. I have not updated my guide that we read from here, so I don't even know what they are. So Jake, take it away. Read me some either ors, and I will just kind of react on the fly. So let's do it.
Yeah, so this first one, I'm going to say it's going to come with the caveat of, like, there's a lot of factors that aren't going to come into play, like dead money, things like that, movability of certain players. Of the 5 starting offensive linemen, we're going to go with the current group: Bernard Ryman, Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, Will Fries, and Braden Smith. Of those 5, who would you definitely want starting for the Colts next year?
2 of them I really want starting, and that's going to be Quentin Nelson and Braden Smith. 1, because you literally cannot move off those contracts whatsoever. But 2, they've had down years. I'm not going to deny it. They've not played up to their contract or up to their ability. But Quentin Nelson's still probably a top 5, top 6, top 7 guard in all of football. Braden Smith's still a top 10 right tackle in football. You're not finding better than that. We saw what happened with the Colts at left tackle when they lost Anthony Costanzo, how hard it is to find another quality player on the offensive line. So yeah, those two I definitely want back starting next year. And the other one who I'm not going to say I 100% want him back starting. Like if there is an upgrade, I get it. But Bernard Ryman, man, these last couple weeks, he's really come along. He's looked like a legit left tackle. If he has a good offseason, again, I'm not saying hand him the job at the beginning of the offseason. Chris Ballard, please adjust. Do not do that again. Don't just give jobs to people. But Bernard Ryman, I think, has shown some really good things these last couple weeks. And I do think him having maybe the first shot at left tackle, depending on what they do in the draft and in free agency, could make a lot of sense. But yeah, Ryan Kelly, I could see him being back. But again, that money's going to be a little tough. And then Will Fries, I think, has done some good things, but he's certainly upgradable. But yeah, the two for sure, Quentin Nelson, Braden Smith, and then Bernard Ryman, I think I would lean towards yes with him as well.
That's pretty much my exact answer. Nelson and Braden Smith, shoe-ins, of course. Everyone else, it wouldn't be the end of the world if that's the same starting five, but there has to be competition. Like Ryan Kelly has equity with this team, but that doesn't mean that he shouldn't be pushed as the starter. Like we've seen a downgrade in his play. Bernard Ryman seems to be getting better. You know, that was the whole thing. He's not going to be great and ready when he hits the field, but he'll get better, and we've seen that. Will Fries has been adequate. Again, it's not going to be the end of the world if it's the starting five, but the philosophy to just like hand these guys the jobs has not panned out well. You have to have depth on the offense. If you're not going to have depth anywhere else, you have to have it on the offensive line.
Right.
So,
yep.
Next up, this one's pretty interesting. Who has the higher upside, Michael Pittman Jr. or Alec Pierce?
I think when you're talking upside, you got to talk about the potential of where these receivers can get, you know, and the benefit that Alec Pierce has in this is we've only seen him for one season, and there's been a lot of great flashes, while also some downside, some poor play. And I think overall his play has been a lot more inconsistent than Michael Pittman Jr. But at some point in the NFL, you get to a point with these receivers where, all right, we've seen this for 3 years now. He's probably just going to be this, which is Michael Pittman Jr. had a great season last year with Carson Wentz, but it started to taper off late in the season. And then we kind of saw that carry into this season where, yeah, there's been a lot of good moments and good games, but it's been a lot of inconsistencies. It's been a lot of filled games, a lot of games where he just hasn't been the number one wide receiver. So I think if we're going upside, I'm tempted to say Alec Pierce just because I think there is more potential for him to surpass where Michael Pittman Jr. is right now. I don't know how much higher Michael Pittman Jr. can't get because, again, we've seen him now for 3 seasons. This is going to be his 3rd season that he's about to finish up. And he's like a low 1,000-yard receiver, high like 800, 900-yard receiver. That's very good. Like you want that on your team. But I think there are some inconsistencies and things that kind of prevent him from taking that next step to be a pure number one, where Alec Pierce, the unknown is tantalizing with him. He could be so much better. So I'll go Alec Pierce for this, but I could definitely see arguments for either side.
Yeah, I was thinking about this one, and as the top receiver, I think Michael Pittman is fine. But if you give him a Batman Robin type of situation, he could be outstanding as that second option. And you kind of have to weigh, is catching 95 balls for 1,100 yards and, almost barely scratching 10, an average of 10 yards per catch, not scoring many touchdowns. What's that worth versus a guy who could be getting like 75 catches for like 1,300 yards and 8 or 9 touchdowns? A true big play threat like Alec Pierce is. He still has work, obviously. We're talking about potential here. I think Pierce's ceiling is a good bit higher. And you mentioned that after a few seasons now, it could be who Pittman is, which is great. Totally worth having on your team.
Right.
We'll see what that's worth when it comes price tag time because these top receivers are getting paid astronomical figures now. So if we see Pierce develop and take another big step next year, that probably is going to answer that question that they'll have next offseason.
Yep. Now you want to hit these last couple either ors really quick. So before we close it out.
Yeah. The last one we'll do is, and again, it's kind of loaded. Would you trade Jonathan Taylor for picks this offseason?
I mean, I think any player should be available at the right price. outside of Grover Stewart, just because my love Grover Stewart is my favorite, and I couldn't watch a Colts game if Grover Stewart wasn't there. But no, and talking in seriously, I think any player should be available for the right price, but I don't see any way that what you're going to get for a Jonathan Taylor this offseason after the year he just had matches the impact that he brings to your team. I don't think it makes any sense. I mean, unless you're getting like a late day 1 pick or maybe an early day 2 pick plus some more, I don't see the point in trading him whatsoever. So sure, I'd entertain it. I would ask what teams would potentially trade for him, but I probably wouldn't trade him. I just don't think they're going to get the type of capital that you would want for a guy that has as much impact on the offense as he does.
Yeah, I don't think I would shop him. Definitely listen if other teams come calling and they give you the right price, like a really nice looking draft pick for it. And I was actually asked this on, I was on with the Locked On Minnesota Sports Show last week. You know, JT had one of the biggest seasons for a Colts running back in franchise history last year, and they didn't even make the playoffs. Like, he was the difference between winning or losing in a few of those games, but it kind of goes to show you the value of that position. So I don't think he's untouchable by any means. He's a player you will always want on your team. He's one of the best playmakers in the NFL, but no one's untouchable. So that's kind of where I land on it. Yep. And on that note, I think that's it for us. We'll be back with you guys tomorrow as we continue to pick apart what the heck is up with this team, what the future looks like, and oh yeah, they have a game again next Monday night. Another primetime matchup for the Colts to be on. At least this one is at home, I guess, so that's always a silver lining.
3 more weeks, guys. We just got to survive 3 more weeks. That's all we need. So make sure you guys are tuning in to our show here on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. And make sure you're following us on social media at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2 on Twitter. We'd also love your ratings and reviews. I know you guys had a lot of fun with that post-game reaction podcast. So we do appreciate all the views and stuff you guys gave there. And thank you for making us your number 1 listen of the day. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. We'll see you guys tomorrow.